This is a session where we are talking to farmers and ranchers, both about what has motivated them to focus on soil health improvements on rangeland, grassland, pasture land. And I am turning this over to my colleague, David Anderson, to be the one to facilitate this session. David joined AFT in 2021 as the Idaho program manager. He's based in Boise. He is also the board president of the Regenerative Agriculture Network of Idaho and a board supervisor for Ada Soil and Water Conservation District. So this is a topic that is near and dear to his heart. And with that, David, let me just say again, this has always been one of the most popular of the sessions in our training because it is really hearing firsthand from farmers and ranchers. And it's a good opportunity for all of you, back to this question of credibility and how can land trusts or public farm or ranch land protection programs demonstrate and be a credible source of information and support for landowners. So this is a good time for you all to ask that question of these folks. 3 of the 4 are farming on permanently protected land. Brad's family is in the process of doing that. So again, all of them have the perspective of being on or close to being on protected land. So with that, David, I'm just going to turn it over to you to introduce them and to go ahead with this session. Just, I'm not sure you saw my note, is if we can make sure that we leave 10 minutes to 15 minutes at the end for questions from the audience, that would be great.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually, and I do see some of my land trust entity partners here in Idaho, so good to see you and have you here. Well, let's, without further ado, let's introduce our participants here today, our panel, and let's start out in the east, and we're going to work our way west. And so, starting in the east from Piermont, New Hampshire, we have Mark Roby with Roby Farms. And yeah, thanks for raising your hand. Just everybody else do that also. Moving over to Clarinda, Iowa, we have Seth Watkins with Pinhook Farm. Welcome, Seth. In Fountain, Colorado, Maggie Hanna with Hanna Ranch. Hi, Hannah, or Maggie. And finally, over in Susanville, California, Brad Hansen with Willow Creek Ranch. All right, well, welcome everybody. So we've got some initial opportunity here just to kind of get everybody to know you a little bit better. If each of you would take about 10 minutes and just give us a bit of an overview about your operation, you know, how'd you get into farming or ranching, and then what motivated you to focus on soil health? Was there a particular inspiration, or is it just something that you've been studying for a while? What practices have you adopted, especially for soil health, permanent pastures, grassland, rangeland? And then what are some of the benefits you've seen as a result of this work? And what are some of the challenges you faced? So with that in mind, we'll start with our panel order. We're going to start with you, Mark.
Hey, David, let me just remind us all that Mark and Seth and Brad and Maggie all provided us some pictures. I believe that Jamie, I don't know, Beth or Jamie, who's going to share their, thank you, share your screen to show some pictures just of their particular farm or ranch as they're speaking.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for that, Chris. So back to you, Mark.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. My screen went crazy on me. So first of all, thank you guys. I really appreciate American Farmland Trust. I appreciate all you guys have done. You've helped us out over the past couple of years with doing a lot of our fences and helping with our rotational grazing. So thanks for that. I'll try and remember all the questions you asked. Quick overview of our farm, what we do. We are I'm the sixth generation on the family farm here. We go back to 1870, and what we do is we raise beef, we raise pigs, chickens. We have dairy cows. We make cheese. We sell bottled milk, and we mainly direct market that all over New Hampshire, Vermont, some into Massachusetts, and into Maine. So that I guess that's a little bit about us. And yeah, I mean, the soil health thing is, I guess, obviously really important for us as it kind of pertains to how efficient our farm works, and it means having to put up less hay for the winter time, and so that's yeah, it's important to us, and the way we kind of manage that is we have a rotational grazing system where we rotate the cows around the pasture. They go on fresh pasture every morning, every evening, and we rotate that around. As you can see in the picture there, we also have chickens, pastured poultry. That's actually, that picture is a little off because the chickens are in front of the cows in that scenario, but normally they would be behind the cows. Normal, I guess, what I assume is normal soil health practices, soil testing, and obviously adding manure to the soil and wood ash when necessary. We don't use any pesticides or herbicides on our fields, and just the model that we have is we don't raise corn. They're grass-fed animals, and so it's important that the grass is high quality. I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, you're doing great, Mark. I was kind of curious, what was your initial inspiration or motivation to learn more about soil health and then start implementing that on the farm?
Gosh, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, I guess, because I think it's just through the generations, it's always been important. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, it wasn't like I had this wake up moment. Oh, now I'm going to start caring about social health. Soil health. It just I kind of grew up with it. You know what I mean?
Excellent. Yeah. Family legacy of stewardship. It's a really great story to tell. So then, you talked about the benefits, Mark, of the, getting a larger hay crop, more nutrition in that hay as a result of the soil health. Were there any challenges that you faced along the way, as part of your soil health journey?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we always have some challenges. A lot of them weather related, right? The most difficult challenges are, when we have drought or like we had last year, which was just constant rain. But as far as challenges, we were helped out a lot. NRCS was a big help in helping us to set up our grazing system. You can see in the picture right there, we have kind of a permanent fencing system around the main field there, and so that would have been a big challenge without the help of NRCS for sure. But yeah, I mean, some of the challenges, I guess, would be, given the fact that we don't use herbicides, is some invasives and stuff like that, or maybe not necessarily invasive, but like Canada thistle and stuff like that tend to be a constant kind of project that we have to keep working on, as well as the fence lines where we have all the multiflora rows that that was brought in, and other invasives. But yeah, I'd say that's probably my biggest struggles with the isn't so much the soil per se, even though the Canada thistle is connected with that, but the field edges, with all the rose bushes coming up.
Yeah, right. Finding that balance with your ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally. All right. Well, thanks for the introduction there, Mark. We'll be coming back to you with some questions here from the community in a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Let's move over to Seth Watkins at Pinhook Farm.
All right. There we go. Great. The background on my farm, it's been part of my family since 1848. It was settled by my great-grandfather. Over the years, with different influences of agriculture, the entire farm at some point or another had been tilled up and farmed. That's unfortunate. It's a hill farm in what's known as the Southern Iowa Drift Plain. We're drifted soil. It's a very pretty part of Iowa. It's a big chunk of our state, and I think sometimes people feel like just because you can, you raise corn, maybe you should raise corn, and that's just not true, So anyway, over time, I've built it into a cattle operation. And at my max, I was running about 3,000 acres and about 600 cows, with the effort of keeping land and forage, which I'm proud of. But at the same time, I was bothered by little things that I felt like I could do better if I didn't have as many cows and as much land. And a lot of them were related to ecological restoration. And some of it was also related to learning and growing new crops and learning new things. So one of the wonderful things about putting my farm in an easement in 2018 is it got me out of debt. And it's allowed me to actually start to transition into making my farm smaller. And I'm now at the point we're at our 100 favorite cows. I have a flock of Katahdin sheep that I bought 3 years ago that I really enjoy because I'm convinced the sheep do eat things the cows don't eat, so I'm able to run them together and not have to add land. I'm really enjoying learning about diversity. We've added some honeybees to the farm over time. And part of this is because I really do believe we need to learn more about the beauty of working with nature, but I think we need more farmers. So, buying the sheep and some of those things, we're looking at ways that a young farmer could transition into agriculture and have an opportunity to get started. And the easement for me was definitely a way to make sure that a young person has a chance at acquiring land at a fair price is what I'd say. I think for me, the why soil health part comes from even like 25 years ago. There were certain things I saw that I didn't like that were going on in practices, and I decided to change. And a lot of those changes worked out. And a lot of those changes were related to ecological solutions, to working with nature, whether it was, moving my calving season from February to April, my transition into no-till, the fact I started using cover crops because I didn't like the way the land looked when it was bare. I didn't know all the benefits. So I was pretty quiet about it for a long time. And then I started to understand this beauty of how nature, when you give her a chance, really does allow us to regenerate our resources and allows us to reduce our operating costs. So I think my answer to the question about why soil health is the fact that we can actually regenerate the resources we all need and create a future of abundance for our children gives me hope for a brighter future versus the model we're basically in right now, which is depleting finite and natural resources to raise the food we eat. And that can only lead to scarcity and conflict. So I'm happy about that. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I'm fourth generation on a farm founded in 1848. I'm learning with this diversification of livestock and species, how little I really know about farming, even though I've been farming my whole life. And making my farm smaller has brought me incredible joy and happiness. And this is the other thing I think about. You know, I understand there's all different sizes of operations, and I've had one. I think the thing I didn't acknowledge was when I was running at the full scale of a larger farm, how absolutely stressed out and wound up and pissed off I was all the time. And I've laughed and smiled and enjoyed life more since January 1st when I gave up my last rented farm than I have in the last 35 years. So working with nature encompasses both our mental health and our physical health and the health of our communities and all of these things. And it really does start with, in my eyes, it starts with protecting the land with the easement. And then it moves on to having a plan to build our soil back up, and we can really renew these resources. And then the only other part I'd throw in there on regenerating and resources and soil health, there's also a factor about the easement. I'm one of 7, so I bought a lot of my siblings out. And I think the other beauty of easements is in succession planning. I wish that my parents would have done something like this, because I actually I held the record for highest priced pasture, or highest price paid for pasture in Page County for like 10 years when I bought one of my sisters out, because, you know, she's like, well, this could be developed. I want this price. And I couldn't have done, and where this ties into soil health and regenerating resources, I couldn't have done any of these things if I didn't put my farm in the easement first. So that's the starting point. And then we can talk about a lot of things that we've used along the way, from soil tests to plans to different practices, but that's the background.
That's great, Seth, and really impressive story to tell. I'm curious, you'd mentioned, you know, that you'd started with 3,000 acres, 600 cows, you're down to 100 cows. Is the full 3,000 acres still in some sort of agricultural production?
No. Oh yeah. I mean, and here's the thing. I'm like a lot of farmers, you know, you rent land. I mean, that's how you build an operation, and you keep renting land, and you borrow money, and you buy more cows. And part of it, I don't think anyone's following me into this. And there are some younger people trying to get into the cattle business. So when I saw them, it's like, you know, I'm comfortable. I did catch pretty good markets on liquidating some equipment and some of the cows. I mean, I'm not, I don't want to be like rainbows and unicorns that I'm going to make this small farm and it's going to be perfect. I'm making my farm smaller to see if it can be done, and let others see the data from it. But I was able to transition 4 younger farmers into the operations that I had rented, and I'm happy for that. I think the other thing I've learned, though, you know, it meant a lot to me, because I remember this is where easements are important again. It's really hard getting out of agriculture. So those are things we don't always think about. And I think these are factors that play in. And an example I'd use also, so on the land I own, and the example I'd use is like the White Rock Conservancy, where they sold some of their land. They were able to sell the land with a soil health easement per se that follows the ownership of the people that bought that land. So these are great tools. You know, I want to regenerate everything I have. I look at some of the farms I've rented, and they aren't being cared for the same way anymore. So when we make the effort to really regenerate the land, to restore our ecosystem, to do these things, I think we need to think about that legal aspect of how we protect our efforts. And again, that's where I just sing the praises of the easements, and in my case, the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, who worked with me and the USDA to get my easement done. But they've made a difference in my life and my farm and a lot of things. And I compare it a little bit to when, I think it was Hernan Cortez burned his ships, you know, when he came to the New World. I mean, now I'm committed, so it's a good thing.
And one more follow-up question. You'd mentioned that you're bringing in this new generation to work on the farm with you. Are they adopting some of the same soil health learning and practices that you initiated?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say, I mean, they're taking over land farms I rented, to be clear. They're asking questions because they love raising cattle and they want to be in this business, and they're open to ideas. And, you know, I don't know if they're as passionate about certain things as I am, but they definitely want to know how I made it for 30 years in that business, renting as much land as I did. So they're probably more interested in the economics of it. And that's great because if we restore our soil, if we protect our water, a lot of other good things fall into place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Seth, for sharing the story of Pinhook Farm with us. And we'll get back to you with some questions in a little bit. So moving on over to Fountain, Colorado, and Maggie Hanna. And Maggie, tell us more about your ranch. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Goodness. Like I haven't been on one of these before. My name is Maggie Hanna. I own and operate Hanna Ranches Incorporated in southeastern Colorado. We are a cow-calf operation. We have a small irrigated hay enterprise as well. And I do some experimenting with sheep and goats as well, but I will, for the purpose of this conversation, note that I farm and ranch in addition to a full-time career. I am the director of the Central Grasslands Roadmap Initiative, and a former employee of a land trust in Colorado. I spent close to a decade with the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, so I have existed on both sides of this fence. Things that we're doing around soil health. We have for many years been involved in a relatively intense grazing rotation. The image that's being shared are some of the challenges that I face. We exist in the northern reaches of the Chihuahuan Desert ecosystems. I have a predominant blue grama grass forage, and we have, during years of drought, some die-off of blue grama grass, and we also get these bald spots. One of the challenges with this forage system is intensity is intended to lay down some of that forage to cover those bare soils, but many of our grasses don't produce enough foliage to actually like lay down high amounts of organic matter. The photo on the left is I have been engaged for the last 2 years with Colorado State University's extension system, doing a soil health and productivity study on the ranch. And then the photo on the right is some of our gates around cross fencing, and just wanted to show you something. It's hard to highlight in some of these in this particular landscape. And then photo on the left, we transitioned all of our irrigation to gated pipe. This was water savings, but I do think there's a soil health implication there. I have a better management of my water resource. And then the photo on the right is we installed 17 watering facilities for livestock to better distribute grazing around the ranch. One of the questions each of our panelists have shared is their sort of what brought them to soil health. I will share, I am from a somewhat unique ag operation. Oops, that's not my family, but they look very nice. I about them. My dad was very involved in some of these types of conversations and projects 30 years ago. He implemented an intense grazing rotation. Oh no. He implemented an intense grazing rotation in the early 1990s. It was based on a hub and spoke system. We operate in a 10-inch precip zone, and that created some unique challenges in that we just had too much pressure at our center points. And so when I came home to the ranch, which was conserved in 2008, so I'm the next generation returning home to a conserved property. We transitioned that grazing system so that we could distribute things a little bit differently and not have such high pressure points on this particular landscape. The other joke that I often tell is I often look at our approach to soil health as being that I'm from a long line of bad mechanics, and we really had to look at focusing on harvesting forage through an animal because we certainly weren't going to be able to maintain equipment very well. But I also think the other component that has like really spurred me into action, for those of you who are not in water scarce environments, I ranch very close to the Front Range of Colorado. So we have very high population densities and a high capacity for growth and interest in growth. And the ranch that borders me to the north was purchased as a buy and dry. So the ranch itself was purchased and the water right was severed and moved up to the served municipalities along the Front Range. This created a really scary impact on my operation in that many of my acres had been historically sub-irrigated because that ranch was also using irrigation water and they had animals on the operation. And so we had a different system functioning. And so I started to lose a lot of forage, predominantly because I had stopped irrigating. And in the West, we are looking at some of these lands that have been farmed and are no longer farmed. We refer to them as go back lands. It's very hard to reestablish some of those landscapes based on their transition soil composition. And this was happening sort of naturally. These lands had not been farmed, they have not been tilled, but they had been sub-irrigated. So I pretty dramatically changed the composition of that landscape. And I didn't change it, it happened to me. So that was what brought me to the table of needing to like really re-engage in this space. In the West, we're looking at really hot, dry times, and bare ground is a scary thing to be looking at. And so figuring out how to reestablish some of those parcels on the operation is important to me. I will share a moment of vulnerability. This is really hard. And it's really hard for reasons that you don't always expect. My grazing rotation falls short on occasion. Is there a reason my camera keeps turning off? Is someone else doing that? No. Sometimes my grazing rotation, I fall out of it because we have an issue with a water line and certain tanks aren't getting water. And so I have to go back or forward in my grazing rotation. We have really unpredictable weather at this point. We had huge amounts of precipitation last year, but they came like really violently. We lost tons of acreage to the river that borders us. And so we had to move cattle all around. So doing this consistently has been a huge challenge. I hope to show up to the table, and I am excited to be engaged with the many partners that have supported my soil health journey. But that's my story. And thank you, Beth, for the comment on my bandwidth.
I'm popping off and on too, so I have to remind myself to check. So no worries there. Well, thanks for that incredible story, Maggie. Ranching in the desert. I lived in Arizona for 20 years, so I definitely see the challenges of ranching in a desert environment. I'm curious. Maybe I missed everything. I was hearing about water conservation. Are there other specific soil health practices that you're implementing?
So our soil health focus is grazing, so animal impact on this particular landscape. The other piece, and this is where I'm early in my soil journey, I've been engaged with the CSU, Colorado State University Extension Soil Health Study, and we collected 2 years of data. We installed soil moisture probes and weather stations. We did forage and soil sampling year over year, and we had test plots of humic acid, adding humic acid and adding a biologic additive. The next phase of that is really analyzing that data and deciding next steps. I am part of this smaller rancher-led collaborative. There are 10 ranching operations part of the soil health study, and we will work on a larger scale outcome of these research plots to impact how we all function. But at this point, water development, grazing rotations are sort of my primary focus on soil, and then this data engagement is the next piece. For those of you who are in states with STAR programs, Colorado, and as part of their Climate Smart Commodities grants, launched STAR program, and I am an enrolled participant in the STAR program as well for the state of Colorado. But that's where we are today.
Oh, very good. Very good. So just the work that you've been doing thus far, I'm kind of curious, are you seeing improvement in your soil water moisture and water retention from precipitation events? Is that something for you yet?
I'm not sure I have that data yet. We monitored through all of last year, which was the first year, and just to share kind of scope, I am running shy of 200 animals on 14,000 acres. And so in the locations where we're grazing, we're only grazing for a couple of days. So I would say things looked good last year based on our precipitation levels, but what that looks long-term, I am hopeful.
Yeah. 200 cows on 14,000 acres. Those cows are on the move.
I wish that. I wish that. Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Maggie, for sharing your story. And hold on for some more another round of questions coming up here. All right. So over to California, Susanville, Brad Hansen with Willow Creek Ranch. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Get your slides queued up here.
No.
There.
Okay. Anyway, my name is Brad Hansen, and we're on the Willow Creek Ranch up in northeastern California. It's kind of in the corner of Oregon and Nevada. Primarily Great Basin country, so pretty arid climate. You know, we get some precipitation mostly in the winter, and not much beneficial precipitation during the summer periods. My wife and I, we live on the ranch along with my parents, Jack and Darcy, and my brother and his wife, Wyatt and Kelly. We're a cow-calf operation, run between 400 and 450 mother cows every year, split into two different herds. One herd will calve in July, and the other herd will calve in March and April. And the benefits we see to that is kind of being able to utilize feed resources differently compared to the nutritional requirements of the cows. And we also get some diversification in marketing by having two herds and get to use your bulls kind of twice a year. So that's kind of why we run the two herds. It has its challenges too, obviously, when you're trying to play with different groups of animals, but by and large, we see that as a benefit to kind of managing the land and managing the soil. We graze in the summertime up on our home place in Susanville, and also have a California Department of Fish and Wildlife grazing lease on some irrigated meadows, and also run on Bureau of Land Management ground right out the gate. So it's kind of nice. It's right next to us and everything. And in the wintertime, we either feed cows on hay that we put up on those irrigated pastures and irrigated meadows. But the majority of the animals we send down to the Sacramento Valley, where they'll have green grass for us in the winter months. And that is part of another California Department of Fish and Wildlife lease. As far as why we consider soil health to be important to our operation, is we think it's just kind of the basis of productive pastures is having good and healthy soils. And some of the ways that we help our soil in a management perspective is we have rotational grazing. We don't consider it, super intensive or anything, but the pastures are pretty well broken up to where we'll leave animals in, for 1 or 2 weeks, and then spread them around the different areas especially once they come off the BLM, because they'll be on the BLM for probably 4 months and then come into the irrigated ground. So it usually gets a really good start before we start putting the animals on it in August. Some other areas where we also find our management benefits soil is in the winter months on the animals that we are feeding hay to, or the animals that we feed hay before they go down to their winter range, is we kind of rotate them around in pastures. And by feeding the hay, as long as it's not too wet or anything, and the animals are obviously, putting manure back on the ground too. And then also that hay matter and stuff will drag the fields in the spring. And we think that kind of helps out in really helping that topsoil get some nutrients back into it versus just taking and then leaving it. Some projects that we've worked with is NRCS. We do quite a few different projects for them. Mainly, they've been the primary avenue we've used to make most of our different pastures in by utilizing their fencing projects. We also use their fencing projects to protect some riparian areas, and we have some more projects to really fence off most of our riparian areas from the livestock, and get some offsite watering as well, putting in some water troughs and some solar pumps for some troughs. We also participate with the California Department of Food and Agriculture as a healthy soils program, and that's kind of a state program, and it's really derived from a lot of the NRCS practices, but it does provide another funding avenue for ranchers in California. And the main thing we've done with them is they provide us funds to take out some of our daily fields. We started rotating a lot of our patch because they're kind of 15 or 20 years old, and just trying to give them a fresh start. And by doing that, we usually put them into triticale for a couple of years, and then California actually helps us put them back into permanent pasture by covering a lot of the costs of the seed and the custom work to do that. They also provide us funds, and we've been working with them to plant a lot of willows. Most of the willows in Willow Creek Valley were taken out by ranchers, decades ago, because they were seen as a nuisance, and with the beavers and stuff, it was just easier just to get rid of them all. And obviously, as far as full ecosystem, it's beneficial to have them there. So we've actually over the last 3 years planted probably close to 1,000 willows with varying degree of success. I think probably 30% are still alive today, and we knew it wasn't, you're not going to get 100% when you're just trimming off a twig and sticking it in the ground. So, but that's been another project that we've participated in. Additionally, last year was the first year, but we're doing a vents project with the University of California Cooperative Extension. For those not familiar with vents, they're collars that you put on cows that are similar to a dog collar in that they have a sound function and also a shock function. And essentially what you can do is take out your phone and build pastures out on that Bureau of Land Management ground. So even though there's existing pastures out there, we're able to divide that further for grazing management and use those virtual fences to keep cattle in certain areas, and specifically off areas such as recent fire activity or riparian areas. It's been a pretty neat tool, and we're doing it again this summer. So it's been a learning curve for sure, but we think there's a lot of good possibilities with that. And we are currently in the process of getting a conservation easement with the California Rangeland Trust. Primary driver for that is just to get out of debt. My mother and father purchased this place from his parents in the early 90s. And as we've grown the herd, and we've actually also purchased another additional acreage up the road that has a pivot on it and stuff, we've just incurred debt. And so one of the primary drivers, along with just preserving the land as it is to really eliminate the debt on the ranch, especially with 10% interest rates currently. It'll be nice not to have that anymore.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. I wanted to circle back on your pasture restoration, starting with the triticale. Then once that you've had the triticale in there for, I think you said a couple of years, then how do you bring the pasture back in? Do you drill? Do you overseed? How does that work?
In the past, usually what we've done is we'll work up the field again, just disc it and then drill the seed in. But actually this year, what we're doing is on that picture there, you can see that field that's on the bottom of the page. That's the brown one. The triticale is already drilled into it, and it'll start coming up this spring. And actually, we're going to drill permanent pasture this spring into that triticale too, kind of at the advice of our cooperative extension and some other farmers in the area that have used that technique. And so it'll just be no-till drilled straight into that triticale this year, and we'll probably let it grow all the way till late summer and maybe just do a light grazing on it this year. So it will not be worked up again, and hopefully that method works a little bit better to where, maybe only after a year of rest or something, we can work it up once just to kind of get rid of that compaction and stuff, and then put the triticale on and then drill that permanent pasture right back in.
Nice. And Brad, for folks in our workshop this afternoon who may not necessarily be soil health experts, would you just give a brief description of how triticale, what that's doing as a precursor species for the soil before you bring the pasture back in?
Sure. Yeah. For us, it will provide some residual matter that'll get this back in, because we're usually just haying it, and then it'll grow back a little bit, and then we're disking it up. So that helps put a little bit of organic matter back in the soil. And honestly, on the fields, the biggest benefit we've had too on the fields that we've put the triticale in is that we do spray it, because to the north of us and above stream of us is a wildlife area, actually, of California Department of Fish and Game that has a terrible weed problem that they haven't addressed. And so weeds have really come into those fields. Just wind, animals trekking them in, however they've gotten there, but they've really spread to those fields, and it gives us a really good opportunity to clean up the fields. And then in the subsequent years after that, we're able to actually, just spot spray. And so we don't have, none of our fields we're spraying every year with any sort of herbicide or anything, but we do have to spot spray because of that issue there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. And then I've got a question, and then Carrie's also got a question about the virtual fencing that you're doing right now. I was kind of curious, how long did it take for your herd to adapt to the collars?
So when we put them on last year, we kept them inside on some of that irrigated ground for a week, is what kind of prior research had dictated that those cows need to actually learn the collars and learn, what the buzzing means, and, what happens if they go outside the buzzing sound, and then, they get a shock and stuff. So it took about a week. And what that entailed is we put them in, it was about 100-acre field. And then, for a couple days, and then we cut the field down, probably to 60 acres. And then we cut it down to about 30 acres. And by the end of that 7 days, they were kind of staying within that area for the most part. But we have found that it's a tough tool on that irrigated ground and with so many animals in a condensed area. We're not quite sure if it ever, or not at the current state anyway, that we'd be able to use real intensive grazing on it and put animals in a super small area. But it has been really successful out on BLM in being able to take a 10,000 acre pasture and cut it into 1,000 acre portions that those animals can then utilize.
And along those same lines, Brad, Carrie's question is have you been able to put those base stations on BLM land? And were there's any challenges in working with the local field office on that implementation?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that question again?
Were you actually able to put the virtual fence base stations on BLM land? Was that a challenge at all for you?
So it was a little bit of a challenge because we're actually part of a wilderness study area. And so even though we're putting out those tower stations out there and it takes, less than 3 square feet and even less of what's actually touching the ground, it did require like an archaeological study and getting some permissions. Our local field office was 100% all for it. They I think want to see how successful it is because for them, and as everyone knows, it's real expensive to build fence. And we had some fires run through there several years ago, and they just rebuilt a bunch of the fence. And it seems like, they don't want to put up any more fence than they have to because then obviously they have to maintain it. So they were very receptive, but it still had to go through a lot of the processes to just even put out those towers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I think that'll be a common situation across the West with our public land leases. So, well, thank you very much, Brad, for that overview of very beautiful Willow Creek Ranch. And not seeing any other specific questions in the chat right now. Let's just kind of do some overarching questions round robin with our panel.
Hey, David. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. This is Beth, but I wanted to take the deck down as you're going through the next questions. But I raced through Seth's photographs, and I just wanted to give him a chance to say, if he wanted to say anything, as I just try not to make you seasick. We skipped over these 2 photographs, and they're very interesting. So, Seth, I don't know if you had anything, the dog's name, are you flying the helicopter, so is there anything you wanted to add to these 2, this photograph and this photograph before I take the deck down?
Sure. Let's go back and start with the donkey. So let's flip back one.
Okay. Whoop, nope.
Oh, other way.
There we go.
I think that this, I love the one of the cattle and the clover. I think that was one of those areas. I use that as an example of the power of ecological solutions. Where I live in what we call fescue country, it's our dominant grass. And I found one of the best things I could do is move to later season calving, which was much better for the animals as far as both, their right to be a cow, to be quite honest, but also lowering their stress levels and a whole bunch of things play in there. But one of the challenges, if you want to calve in April and May in southern Iowa, you've got to get your cows bred on straight fescue in July and August. And the ecological solution to that was incorporating clover into my grazing system. So the outcome wound up, I haven't had to buy a pound of synthetic fertilizer since. It's enhanced biodiversity. It's improved forage production. I mean, it's just this beautiful example of what happens when you work with nature. The donkey and the sheep, I probably lost my mind, but I wish I would have gotten sheep 30 years ago. I really enjoy them. I got really lucky. I got a really good donkey. I don't think it always goes that way, but her name's Nancy. She's just outstanding. And honestly, like my morning routine is I go out and I check everything and then I give Nancy like a carrot or a peppermint or something. And we I kind of think about how lucky I am to get to do what I do. So that's really the deal there. And the rest of the background, we'll go to the next photo. I can give a little more background there. That's my old border collie, Bill. And so Bill was, oh my gosh, he died when he was 16, and that was in 2007. So he was like 14 there. But the story behind that is in 2005, sometimes we hear, and you know, you're special because you're a farmer and you're feeding the world and blah, blah, blah. And I decided I wanted to buy a camera and take a picture of something on the farm every day for a year to show how special I was, you know, to kind of lay that shit out there. But anyway, the reality is within 2 months of taking that picture every day for a year, I realized how lucky I was to have this as my vocation. And I realized how grateful I was for all the other people that allow me to do that, from my son who has special needs. We'll talk about Spencer, you know, the para that works with him at school, the lady that helped take care of my dad when he was older, the mechanic that fixes my stuff. I don't get to do any of this without a whole bunch of other people. And I think that really drives me to make sure I'm doing my very best to take care of the soil, to take care of the water, because I personally believe that these are common resources that belong to us all. And so anyway, what started as kind of a industry driven, you know, America needs farmers crap turned into me waking up and seeing that I need every single person out here to have the best resources possible. So that's what I learned from my camera. And I think everyone should buy a camera and take a picture for every day for a year. That was just, I mean, it's so freaking cool to farm with a helicopter. That was just us putting on cover crops one day. And you can actually see my beehives in the background. And then my favorite, this picture of Spencer and Tatum. I started this journey when the kids were pretty little. And I realized that I don't, you know, money's important, but I don't think it always values the things that matter most. I don't think it values our soil the way it should. I don't think it values our natural resources. I don't think it values our families always the way it should. So I decided that if I could make enough money to send Tatum to a good college, never jeopardize the land in any way, and provide a good life and a purposeful life for Spencer, who has special needs and has taught me far more about the values of compassion and understanding than anyone ever could. And maybe have enough money left over for like a 6-pack of beer on Friday nights, I'd have had a perfect life. And that picture was taken last year. Tatum had just gotten accepted into Grinnell College, and I was just so proud of her. So I achieved the college thing. Spencer and I are having a ball working together to make the farm smaller, and I'm being reminded every day of the purpose of agriculture and the purpose it has in our lives and how important that is. And I'm thankful for it. And one of the things we have is some laying hens for Spencer, and that's they weren't supposed to be in the house, but he really likes them, so we brought one in for the college picture, and that's what it was in. So there's the skinny.
Oh, thanks, Seth. That's
Oh, I'm
great.
so glad I asked. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for following up with that, Beth. I would have missed hearing the rest of Seth's story. Well, let's just a couple of overarching questions for all of you. I know all of you touched on some of this a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we cover this. And that is that, you know, when you go to look for information on soil health or regenerative practices, either looking past as you started your journey or even where you are now as part of your continuing education, you know, what are your sources? Who do you go to? Are they your conservation districts, your extension agents? Some of you, I heard you mentioned NRCS, you know, other producers, right? A lot of times farmers and ranchers only listen to other farmers and ranchers, and that's only when their wheat's a foot taller or their calves are 100 pounds heavier. So just kind of curious, who do you learn from? And Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, yeah, the extension office in New Hampshire, UNH Extension is a great resource that I use quite a bit. And the NRCS is a great resource. You know, this day and age, for sure, you can find out a lot on YouTube. You know, I mean, honestly, there's information out there if you want to look for it, that's just wasn't available 20 years ago, you know. So yeah, I would say those are the main places I look.
Excellent. Seth, how about you?
I jotted down, I think other farmers, I mean, we heard a great example, like when Brad was talking about using hay as a tool for soil health. I mean, immediately I've got the same. I've got a soil map in my office, so you know where to unroll hay in the winter. Those are things we learn from each other, and it's powerful. NRCS has been helpful on technical stuff. I think we all need to be trying to figure out how this Inflation Reduction Act money and the Climate Smart money is going to work, because there's more money than I've ever seen in my life, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it right now that's coming toward us. Practical Farmers of Iowa is one of my favorites, and they're not just for Iowa farmers, so PFI. Ag Soil Regen, so that's where I work through, like the Haney soil test is one I'm a fan of. Everyone can pick their own, but I like what Liz Haney and Russell Hedrick are doing with that organization, bringing farmers together through conferences, reaching out, and the Haney test has made a big difference. And honestly, the other one, I really think we were better off when they taught agriculture as an art and a science. And I think when you see something and it doesn't look right or feel right, trust your heart, trust your gut, and then try to learn why it's that way. Then apply the science to it and understand it. This started for me because I didn't like seeing bare soil and muddy streams and shivering calves. And then all of a sudden I found out, yeah, that's a bad idea. So some people say our downfall was when we switched from teaching animal husbandry and changed the name to animal science. So bring that back again.
Yeah, absolutely. Maggie.
Yes. My primary resource is my relationship with CSU Extension. An interesting component of this conservation easement. Our conservation easement is primarily on our irrigated ground, not our range ground, because when we did the easement, the range ground just didn't quite fit in the conservation priorities of our land trust partner. So my land trust partner has not been my primary source of soil health, but CSU has been an exceptional partner. And I will just note, we have had high turnover in our field offices of NRCS, and so I find them a wonderful resource. I have great number of connections that have offered me incredible components of my education, but it is not always coming from my field staff. It is sometimes coming through other parts of my career and different relationships with NRCS.
Interesting. And then Maggie, I heard you mention earlier the Colorado STAR program, and I just wanted to inform our participants today that the founders of the STAR program started in Illinois, and then working with Helen Silver, were able to bring the program to Colorado, and then that really was foundational for them to be able to receive one of the Climate Smart Commodity Grants last year, to be able to expand that STAR program, I believe, to 12 Western states, most of those being the Intermountain West states. And so just wanted to let folks know that this is coming. And I was wondering, Maggie, if you would just share with everybody just kind of an overview real quick about what that program is and what kind of benefits that you're seeing from being in that program.
David, I'm going to answer a question because you've kind of pressed me on this twice, and I'm going to just share that given I'm early in my soil health journey, seeing results is often in my pre-sib zone a 10-year proposal. So in terms of seeing results, I'm going to say no, I don't have any results to show, but the STAR program, for those of you who are not aware or do not yet have access to it, is a series of soil health practices and changes for operators to engage with. It offers a cost share program to manage some of the risk of those changed behaviors. And you gain partners in soil health through the program. They have, and I will speak, my partners to the east of me maybe have more robust relationships with the STAR program. For the state of Colorado, this is brand new. This enrollment period was last October of 23. So we're in the infancy. So my partners in Illinois and Iowa and some of those places likely understand this program in a different light, but there are opportunities for implementing different grazing protocols, changing how and where you have things seeded, what additive components are happening on the operation, how you use water, testing that's happening, and then you are rated on a 5-star operation, and you have the ability to utilize that as a marketing proponent for your products as well. But in terms of results, I don't have much to report, but if you would like, I'm happy to follow up with you in 6 to 10 years and tell you all about it.
Okay. All right. Very good. And not to put you on the spot for results, just knowing that STAR program is new, just curious how that was working. So we're looking forward to the rollout of that to, I know New Mexico has gotten started, and the folks over there at STAR program are reaching out now to, I believe, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. So stay tuned, everybody. One of the challenges that we have a lot of times with incentivizing the adoption of soil health practices and regenerative practices is, what's the standard to compare to? And what kind of metrics can equitably assess soil health improvements. And so that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to the STAR program doing for a lot of our working landowners, is just putting some boundary conditions on that for them to get them started. So thanks for sharing more details on that, Maggie. And then finally, Brad, real quick, any program you mentioned actually partnering with, I heard a couple of state agencies. Any others you wanted to point out?
Real quick, one thing too, my dad was actually a first generation rancher. He got into it after getting just kind of tired of the Bay Area, and he worked in finance down there, hustle and bustle. So when he got into ranching and he just wanted to do it, he learned 95% of everything he knows, is what he says. He learned from cooperative extension and his veterinarian. And so cooperative extension's kind of always been one of our kind of favorite events and favorite organizations to go to stuff that they put on. Another one, as Seth said too, just other farmers or ranchers in the area that might have experience trying something new or trying something different. Those are really, great kind of tutorials to see, because you can drive by their place and you can see what they're doing. And, as long as they're willing to tell you kind of about it, I think you can learn a ton from neighbors. And one other kind of offshoot one is, I don't know if anyone else gets Progressive Forage, but it's a monthly publication and it's free. And they have just a lot of good information, because essentially it's, cooperative extension and university studies condensed into a monthly publication, and you can still get a hard copy of it and they'll mail it to you. And I think there's been a ton of great information in there, sometimes too much because you want to kind of do a bunch of things, but then you realize you're limited to what you can do. But I think those three are kind of some main ones that we look forward to.
Very good. And I believe I heard Mark, Seth, and Brad, all the three of you, I believe, are working with NRCS programs in some way. And so I'm just curious if you could just give us a little bit more detail on which actual program you're working with. Is that EQIP? Is that CRP? Maybe you've got a SIG grant, something of those nature. And we'll just go the other direction this time. Brad, what you'd mentioned, I think you're working with NRCS on your fencing project. Is that right?
Yeah, we're fencing off at this latest round. We're fencing off about half-mile total of the creek that kind of runs through our property. One for soil health. There's not a ton of erosion through there, but there's definitely some spots, the cattle hit more than others. And it's also became a pain with cows, because some of them figure out they can cross it and they take the whole herd with them. And that's supposed to be a pasture boundary. And it is a lot of time of the year, but sometimes it's not. We're doing that. And then we're also doing some offsite watering where we'll put a pump in the creek and, put some of that, I can't remember the name of the pipe, just lay it on top of the ground, that HDPE, whatever, and have some offsite troughs and some storage tanks to keep cattle away from the creek again, and help distribute the cattle better also throughout the pasture. And the last project, you mentioned CRP. We actually do grazing land CRP on some ground that's just sagebrush, nothing that we're going to ever do anything with probably. And we've actually got that enrolled in grazing land CRP, but that is outside of the conservation easement property. It's actually a pivot that we have that's just up the road that wasn't necessarily on those maps that we showed you.
Very good. And just clarify, Brad, are you using equip for your
Yes,
fencing,
yeah,
your water? Equip, okay.
All equip. And we actually have another smaller project through it's a company called Point Blue, and it was through a block grant that they got from the state of California, and they're helping out with a different fencing project, but again, just riparian fencing. And also through that program with Point Blue, we're taking out some fences on the California Department of Fish and Wildlife properties that we graze on, because they're just down fences and they're not good for wildlife. I know that has nothing to do with healthy soils, but that's another avenue that we've gone to find funding to do projects.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. Seth, I think you've worked with NRCS programs, yeah? And you're on mute.
I've used equip to build ponds several years ago. I'm using equip right now to buy a solar water pump and lay some water line. I'll be honest, as I've gotten more established, I go back and forth. There's a side of me sometimes that at the end of the day, most of those things are worth it, but sometimes they can really complicate things. I mean, I can build a pond just as good for less money than the cost share. I mean, it's got to be weighed out. I want NRCS to work and I want it to be efficient and effective, but it goes both ways. CRP, which would be a Farm Service Agency program, is a nice tool. They are opening up some grazing. They're looking at opening up some grazing for beginning producers and underserved producers. I think that's a really good thing because it gives some opportunity to get young people in again. The biggie that I look at as CRP as a tool, especially for a landowner, is when you combine it with geospatial technology. We talk about where's a good place to start, and working with your NRCS office to put a geospatial map over your farm, and this would be more in cropping areas. Not every acre was supposed to be farmed, and this is really low-hanging fruit. And to identify that land that you shouldn't farm and put it into some kind of a CRP program or tree program, not only get the ecological benefit, but generally you see an increased return on investment on the total farm. It's some farmers hate to be told that not every acre they have is perfect, but the reality is it's like, quit focusing on revenue and start focusing on return on investment and treat this as a business. And nature wins and you'll win is what we've seen there.
Yeah, intriguing. I look forward to learning more about the geospatial use of CRP. That's intriguing. Mark, NRCS, using any of their programs?
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess my ignorance here a little bit. I generally just talk to my people over at NRCS and they tell me where I should go. But I'm pretty sure it's equip. That sounds familiar. I think that's what I've used mostly.
Excellent. Very good. And what a great office. Yeah, they make
it
easy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the salt of the earth. Good folks.
Excellent. Very good. Well, so understanding that on our workshop here today, this group is staff of land trusts and other public programs that are purchase conservation easements on our working lands. What suggestions would you have for them about the role you think they could play in supporting working landowners and producers to interested in improving their soil health? So now you're talking to everybody here with your response on this. And Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I don't know exactly. That's hard because I mean I think that you guys all have better brains than me and are working on this very thing on how to help out with soil health in particular. There's a lot of things farmers need help with, but I think that I hate to say it, I feel like I should have something above and beyond what you're doing, but I think that it's what you're doing is good. Just education is big, and we got help from Farmland Trust for some soil amendments and stuff like that. So you're also providing that, both material help and education help. I'm sure there's something beyond that, but I just can't think of it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and thank you for the feedback. It's always good to hear that we're accomplishing our mission out there.
You bet.
Seth, what would you tell a land trust entity? What would you give them as guidance to help start the soil health question?
One place I thought about, and you asked Maggie a couple of times, what are the results? What are the results? I'll be the first to tell you, the results are slow to come, but I think a more important question to ask are what are the results of not doing this? When we start this journey of regenerative ag and simply, sometimes it is just triage and we're just stopping the bleed. And I think of the things I've gone through over the years, but it gets a little better every year and it gets a little easier. And what I look at though, as I drive around the landscape in the countryside are where people aren't doing it. And you see the expansion of desertification, you see the loss of soil organic matter, you see the loss of biodiversity, some of those. I think those are really important questions to ask, or, what if we don't do this? Something I've noticed, and I'm, I think I don't want to use a broad brush because I know a lot of people see this the same way, but I'm amazed at, there's a lot of people in agriculture and a lot of people in the environmental world that actually share the attitude that nature and agriculture are mutually exclusive. And personally, my experience has been that couldn't be farther from the truth. I think that a well-balanced ecosystem, whether it's with my cow herd or anything I do, I believe I can't farm without nature. But I'm amazed my friends on, very hardcore environmentalists, they'll say, oh no, God, you can't have farming around this. And my friends that are farming saying, if you want to go hunt, go out west. I'm like, no way, man. I said, this whole thing works together. So remember that we really depend upon each other would be something really important to think about. And for the land trusts that have some available land, I think there's real power in scalable demonstration farms of showing what we can do, where farmers can come together, set some guidelines, say, this is going to be all no-till, all covers, and you're going to do grazing, or this is where you're going to do wildlife enhancement. And you get all the money from it, that's okay, but let's come together on something of scale and experiment a little to see what's possible. I think there's a lot of strength and a lot of power in that. And within that also, we've got a couple of neat examples in Iowa. One is called In Harmony Farms, the other is Global Greens, where they help refugee farmers get access to a little bit of land. And we're talking, an acre, maybe 2 acres. But the thing that's so inspiring for me when I visit them is I'm reminded of that I really don't know very much about agriculture when I see someone raising 20 or 30 different plants or vegetables and stuff. But we've got land, we've protected land. Let's help those who really need land get access to it. And I think that's really important.
I second that for sure. That's definitely, land access is a critical issue for our underserved Americans. Maggie, I'm curious.
Yes.
Any words of advice for either the land trust that you've partnered with, or if you were to, want to engage hear from them, how would you think they'd be able to start that conversation better with landowners?
This is a bit of an unfair answer given that I spent a decade in the land trust space. But I think our land trust partners have a really powerful place to play and two two components here. One, a conservation easement is an incredibly intimate process. You learn the inner workings of family dynamics. You learn the inner behind the curtain of operations finances. You learn what's happening on the ground. You understand their operation at a level that not a lot of people get invited into. So you exist in a place of trust. And that is a powerful place to have discussion around change. And the second component is, aside from the landowner, there is no one else that has a long-term commitment other than the land trust partner. Our federal partners turn over, those jobs change, people go on through their careers, which is all well and good. But the land trust has a perpetual commitment to that landscape and the landowner and the land steward. And I think that is a place that offers landowners a lot of comfort in making change, that when it's slow, they have a partner and that partner is not walking away. I think as we build relationships and figure out how to engage outside parties on these sometimes scary transitions, knowing that someone's going to see it through is a really powerful place to have a partner. And that is, I think, where I would encourage land trusts to see themselves and to take care of those relationships in that vein as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That really resonates with me. Just this past Sunday evening, I had family dinner with the generation ahead of me on our family ranch to start the succession planning conversation. And one of the things that we're considering is a conservation easement. And I shared those same words, Maggie, and that is that, this isn't something that's just kind of a quick transactional sort of thing. This is a relationship, and a relationship that's going to last for generations. And so go slow to go fast, right? Yeah, great. And then Brad, you're midstream on your conservation easement, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so curious, where is soil health or regenerative practices? Has that shown up in your conversation with your land trust partner?
Not necessarily directly, but I do think, pasture management and, we have to have a grazing plan as part of our conservation easement. So, indirectly, soil health, I do believe, is addressed in there, as well as, there will be some restrictions on, we talked about that triticale rotation and stuff. There's gonna be parts of the ranch we're not gonna be able to do that anymore, which is, fine. We know it's in there and stuff. So I think there's elements of soil health tied into it without specifically saying soil health. And I would also encourage the land trust agencies, when you are engaging landowners and stuff, not that soil health isn't something they care about, but if you told them something like pasture health or something that maybe is some more visual than when someone thinks of soil health versus pasture health. Pasture health is something I think they can get a grasp on a lot easier and see it on an annual basis of how the pasture is doing, even though that'll be kind of a direct relationship with the soil health itself. So I would just, if you're a land trust and you're trying to have a workshop or something, feel free to use, pasture improvement versus soil improvement, or use both and stuff. Because I think sometimes ranchers, resonate more with, pasture improvement will, might equal more dollars in my pocket type of thing.
Yeah, very good. A question that is on my mind for all of you is what kind of conversations are you having with your neighbors about both, their interest in possibly permanent protection of their working lands, and or their interests in soil health and regenerative practices? Do you find yourselves being a model or an inspiration in your neighborhoods? And we'll start with Mark on that question.
Sorry, I was a little distracted. I caught the second part of the question. Do I see myself as or does it seem as though we're kind of setting standard for other farmers in the area? Is that what the question was?
Are you noticing, are your neighbors interested? Are they interested in the fact that you've permanently protected your farm? Or do they stop by and say, hey, I noticed, your crop's taller, your hay's deeper? Do they check in and ask you what you're doing?
No, I don't think that's ever happened. I don't know if you, maybe it might be a New England thing. Us farmers pretty much keep to ourselves. We're very, very independent up here. So there's not many farms left, to be honest. When I was a kid, there was probably a dozen dairy farms. It's a big dairy farming area where I'm at in my town, and there's 2 of us left. So there isn't the community that there used to be with the farming here in the Upper Valley. So no, I mean, we're all, I don't want to give the wrong impression. We're all friendly with each other, but it's not that I can't remember an instance where we have those types of conversations.
Interesting. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, you bet.
Seth, how about any peer-to-peer going on for you?
Yeah, I think this is where Practical Farmers of Iowa and the Ag Soil Regen crew has created a platform for this. So if a farmer's interested and they want to learn, they come to the conference, they go to some of the events that PFI has organized. I think for me, it's more important. I've always felt it's more important I'm there to help my neighbor when they need something and not pass my judgment on what they're doing or not doing, so that we can have that conversation later. So I'm more on making sure I maintain the trust. They all know what I'm up to, and it's more sometimes someone will stop by and visit a little, or maybe it's the lady that I saw at the hospital the other day that was tickled because she'd seen I planted a bunch of trees, and she was thankful that happened. But at home, I mean, they're my neighbors, so I don't get too evangelical, so to speak. I think one thing I wrote down though right now, I think there's opportunities for some land trusts to get more involved where farmers are, whether it is at fairs or stock shows or ag events. I get a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people asking when I give a presentation and talk about how the easement was one of the most important things I did. And then, I mean, God, the last 2 seasons of Yellowstone have been the best promotion we could have for easements and grazing. I mean, when you have Beth Dutton say, I'm going to put the whole thing in a conservation easement, that's pretty awesome. So we need to capitalize on that.
Yeah, definitely seeing the Yellowstone effect out here in my part of the world too. So interesting. Maggie, curious, and especially with your background in conservation, I'm just kind of curious, do you find yourself being a voice for conservation and regen ag?
I will confidently say yes. I find myself being a voice for conservation easements specifically, and my current professional obligation has me advocating for the protection of grasslands as well, which I think is incentive to keep grass right side up, which I think solidly fits into regenerative ag. I will note that one of these soil health projects that I'm involved with is a rancher-led collaborative working on soil research. And so we have this small group. I think one of the most powerful places to learn has been these small peer-to-peer spaces. Ag is such an interesting industry because you are asking people to change behavior, but this is our business and our living room. And so it's scary to show people what's happening and what's working and what's not working. And there's a lot of vulnerability that we ask to be able to say like, hey, what did you do over here? And to have people respond honestly. So the small group space around peer-to-peer opportunities is really important to me and to my community. I will note, I am the president of my local cattlemen's affiliate and the president of our conservation district. So I have an opportunity to ask people a lot of these sort of intrusive questions from a place of safety, that I'm not just asking as their neighbor, but that these are important industry conversations as well. And I had the opportunity for a decade to support the conservation easement monitoring of CCLT, which allows you to see for a lot of different operations. And I think one of the coolest parts of ag and one of the most eye-opening things is that we can all do this and produce good, safe food for the country, and we can do it a million different ways. And like, some things are going to work on my place that don't work on my neighbors because we have different labor or we have different irrigation infrastructure. So I think from a land trust perspective, enjoy the fact that you get invited down the driveway and take that opportunity to learn from different operations. People do things differently, and it's very cool to see how it plays out. But I would say nothing I am currently doing has anyone raising big eyebrows. So.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, really good. We have just 3 minutes left here before we close this session. So Brad, I'm curious, any cross-pollination going on in your part of the world?
We have really good relationships with all of our neighbors, and at any sort of, and some of our closest neighbors are actually my cousin and his uncle, and they do our custom farming, so they know everything that's going on our place right there. But the neighbors that drive by and stuff, we're really friendly with them, and they'll ask us questions, and we go up to their place and, we might ask them questions. So it's pretty open. As far as the conservation easement part, a couple of our neighbors already have conservation easements, and the other two are more of the mindset they don't want to ever have anyone to tell them how and what they're going to do with their property. And so we just, that's kind of it on that perspective. But I think a lot of people up here are open to conservation easements, like the idea, but there's some that I just think right now aren't, even if they don't ever plan on changing their operation, a conservation easement wouldn't drastically change their operation. They're just against the idea of having that restriction.
That is a pattern out there. And so we look forward to the day they catch up with us. Well, very good. Well, we are at the end of our session. I want to offer my heartfelt gratitude to Mark, Seth, Maggie, and Brad for volunteering and joining us today, sharing your stories, very meaningful, and look forward to continuing to stay in touch and learn more about as you continue to progress down your soil health journey.